There's a kind of loneliness no one prepares you for. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of waiting on God. You've prayed, you've tried to be patient, you've done what you thought was right, and now nothing moves. No clarity, no reassurance, just time passing and a silence that starts to feel personal. That's where this kind of loneliness begins. Not waiting in general, but waiting on God. It often begins quietly. You've prayed, you've thought it through, you prayed again and waited. You've tried to do the right thing, and now nothing moves. No door opens, no clarity arrives. Life keeps going around you, but your own moment feels paused. And what makes it heavier isn't the waiting itself, it's the silence inside it. Waiting on God doesn't usually look holy from the outside. It looks unproductive. It looks like falling behind. It looks like watching other people move forward while you're standing still, wondering if you misunderstood something, wondering if you waited too long. Maybe you didn't say the right words, or worse, if you're being ignored. Most people assume faith makes waiting easier. That belief brings comfort. But lived experience tells a different story. Waiting can actually intensify loneliness, because you're not just waiting for change, you're waiting for reassurance. Some sign that the pause has a purpose, and when that sign doesn't come, the loneliness deepens. This is where the tension sets in. You want to trust, but you also want answers. You want to be faithful, but you don't want to feel forgotten. And the longer the waiting lasts, the more personal the silence feels. At some point, it stops feeling like patience and starts feeling like abandonment, even if you're afraid to admit that out loud. There's a reason waiting feels so isolating. Most of life rewards movement. We have turned into a society of instant gratification that has been amplified by technology. Action is praised, progress is visible. Even struggle feels easier when something is happening. Waiting removes all of that. There's nothing to show, no milestone, no proof. Just time stretching forward, unanswered. And faith doesn't remove that discomfort. It exposes it. Because now the question isn't just when, it's why. Why would a loving God allow a season that feels this empty? Why would direction come to a halt when obedience was the goal? Why does doing the right thing sometimes lead to more uncertainty, not less? This is the part of faith people don't talk about much. The loneliness that comes not from disbelief, but from belief that hasn't been rewarded yet. The ache of trusting something you can't see, while everyone else seems to be moving confidently in a direction you don't have. Waiting creates a strange inner conflict. On one hand, you're trying to remain steady. On the other, your mind keeps searching for patterns. You replay prayers. You revisit decisions. You wonder if you missed a sign or misunderstood the timing. And slowly, without realizing it, waiting turns inward. It becomes self-questioning, self-doubt, a quiet sense of being left behind. What makes this loneliness different is that it's hard to explain to others. If you say you're lonely, people assume you need more connection. If you say you're tired, they tell you to rest. But waiting on God doesn't fit neatly into advice. You're not idle by choice. You're not lost. You're paused. And no one knows how long that pause will last, so you carry it quietly. You keep functioning. You keep showing up. But inside there's a gap where certainty used to be, a sense that life is happening somewhere else. And in that space, loneliness grows. Not because you're faithless, but because faith has asked you to stand still without explanation. This is where many people assume they're doing something wrong, that the loneliness is a sign of weak faith. But often it's the opposite. Loneliness shows up because you're still engaged, still hoping, still listening. If you had given up entirely, the waiting wouldn't hurt this way. There's something uncomfortable about this truth. Waiting often strips faith down to its most honest form. No reassurance, no emotional payoff, just trust without feedback. And that kind of trust feels isolating because it can't be shared easily. It's internal, invisible, personal. Even Scripture reflects this tension. Moments where faith is less about confidence and more about endurance. Seasons where nothing resolves quickly. Where people wait not because they want to, but because they have no other faithful option. These moments aren't presented as peaceful. They're presented as real. The loneliness of waiting isn't proof that God is distant. It's often the cost of staying present when nothing is clear yet. That doesn't make it easier, but it reframes it, because waiting isn't just a pause in movement. It's a narrowing of attention. When everything else slows down, you become more aware of what you're carrying. Your fears surface. Your expectations are exposed. The noise fades, and what's left is honesty, sometimes uncomfortably so. This is where many people are tempted to rush the process, to force decisions, to create movement just to escape the loneliness. But forced movement doesn't bring peace. It just replaces waiting with regret later. And deep down, you know the difference between patience and avoidance. Waiting asks something difficult, to remain where you are without numbing the discomfort. To resist turning loneliness into distraction, to let the silence exist without filling it prematurely. And this is the part that rarely gets said clearly. Loneliness in waiting doesn't mean you're forgotten. It means you're in a space where growth isn't visible yet, where faith is being exercised not through action, but through restraint. That kind of faith doesn't look impressive. It doesn't feel rewarding, but it is real. Waiting seasons don't last forever, even when they feel endless. But while you're in them, the loneliness can teach you something important, not about God's absence, but about your own need for certainty, validation, and timing. It reveals how much reassurance you've relied on, and how little faith is left when reassurance disappears. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're learning what faith looks like without emotional support. If you're in a season like this, where waiting feels isolating, where silence feels personal, you're not alone in that experience, even if it feels that way. Many people walk through these seasons quietly, carrying the same questions, the same ache, the same uncertainty. Waiting isn't a punishment, and loneliness isn't a verdict. Sometimes waiting is simply the space where trust is refined. Not through answers, but through endurance. Waiting can produce patience, perseverance, and endurance. It can draw us closer to God and point those who are watching us to the gospel. Waiting is not easy. Who said it was supposed to be? Just hang in there and have faith God is working this out in His time. And if this hits you where you are right now, you're not imagining it. You're not behind. You're not forgotten. You're waiting. And that, difficult as it is, still counts as faith. These videos are for those quiet moments, the ones most people don't talk about. And if this resonated, tapping like and subscribe helps it reach others who may be waiting in the same silence. You're not alone here. See you in the next video.